There are two kinds of people within the social justice movement. You can't necessarily tell them apart because the current system, the current circumstances make them sound alike. The first group, by far the much larger group and the much more difficult one for people like me to figure out what to do with, are people who are actually against oppression. I'm against oppression, so ordinarily I would think these would be my natural allies, but yet they attack me. The second group inside the movement are people who wish to turn the tables of oppression. Those would be my enemies. The fact is, though, the ones who wish to confront oppression and to undo it don't realize what they've signed up for. Many of the prime movers in the movement are actually bad actors who have not shared the plan with the rank and file of the movement. So many of the people inside the movement are well-intentioned, but not skeptical enough and have fallen into something unholy. The allies tend to sign on based on what I would call the label on the box. So there's a box and it says equity on it, and then people are asked, well, are you in favor of racial equity? Most people would answer yes. Okay, you're with us. But what's in the box is not actually equity. And so one finds, if you sign up based on the label of the box, that you've signed up for something that you didn't bargain for. There's another reason that allies sign on with the bad actors who are driving the social justice movement, and that is out of fear of being targeted themselves. So we have a very dangerous movement. It's proven that it has the power to harm people, and many people who fear that it might come for them, that it might ferret out some kind of hidden white supremacy in their minds or something, sign up in an effort to demonstrate that they are good people so that the movement does not come after them. We also have what I would call marginal coalition members who have signed up in an effort to get ahead for fear that they will be shunted onto the other side. So the coalition is built from intersectionality, a term you've no doubt all heard, where one's rank within some sort of future idealized state is based on how much historical oppression you have faced based on which populations you belong to and what their history has been. Now, I will point out that even if we accept intersectionality on its own terms, it is completely incoherent. So, for example, as a Jewish person in the United States, I have not experienced too much oppression myself. That said, if intersectionality is good to its word, then the fact that my ancestors experienced literally thousands of years of consistent oppression ought to count in my favor with respect to whether or not I have the right to an opinion, whether I have the right to help shape the movement. But no, in fact, for some reason, my Judaism counts against me. I can't fathom why, except for the fact that really it's a self-serving ideology that chooses to highlight certain facts and to de-emphasize others. So coalition members are prioritized based on how many different categories of historical oppression they can claim apply to them, which means that there are a certain number of groups that have only a small number of these oppression points. On our campus, people who are simply gay have only one oppression point, and so they have to work extra hard in order to remain in the good graces of the movement. The same thing goes for people who are simply women. Also Asians. Now, I'm not making this up, and I'm not even inferring it. The fact is, during the day of absence, there were seminars on how Asians are part of the problem when it comes to white supremacy. I mean, you can't even really make this stuff up. It's that preposterous. So, in any case, my point would be, you can imagine if you have some dangerous force wielding the power over your ability to do your job or to be hired, or the likelihood that you will be fired, if that group is wielding that kind of power and you happen to be on the border of its good graces, some fraction of people will choose to behave in a way that advertises that they are signed up for this plan, whatever it is, in hopes of just simply getting out of the way of it. Universities and colleges are now at the epicenter of this fight. Many of us who have been involved deeply in making university and college culture find this very odd. Is it really true that we have a terrible problem with racism on college campuses today? Is that really what we're to infer from this? I think it's very much the wrong conclusion. What's happening is there are deep problems with equality, and they're very uncomfortable to navigate. But the colleges and universities are being attacked not because they are the epicenter of this. In fact, they are the most progressive places that we have. They are the places that are most likely to recognize historical oppression and to realize that it has important implications for how well people do in life. But what they are is soft targets. They're soft targets, and because they're listening, they are easy to manipulate. Were it the objective of this social justice movement to confront the much more difficult problems and to confront them at the full level of nuance, I would be interested in seeing those problems addressed. But I cannot sign up with a movement that is attacking those people who have come the greatest distance toward creating an equitable situation. Okay, so what is it that this movement is actually trying to achieve? Now remember, I'm arguing that there are actually two groups embedded in one movement. One of those groups is really hoping to achieve some kind of equality. Hopefully they're pursuing equality of opportunity, not equality of result, but nonetheless, equality is something I would guess everybody in the room here would sign up for as an ideal that would be worth pursuing. But then there's the other faction. The faction that I'm arguing is actually driving the agenda of the movement. What do they want? Well, it's very uncomfortable, and in fact, I got into big trouble for tweeting that the movement at Evergreen was actually involved in achieving black supremacy. Now, it's interesting. I must have been challenged 20 times over having used the term black supremacy. Not once did anybody tell me that that was not what they had seen unfolding during the protests at Evergreen. They told me effectively that that was an impolite term for it. But we had all seen it. We had all seen the circumstance where people would walk into a room and they would say, the food, the chairs, the water, that's not for white people. If you're a white person, stand in the back, don't sit in the chairs, don't eat the food. This was actually said out loud. So in some sense, it's undeniable that what was being pursued was a kind of supremacy. My feeling is I'm against any kind of supremacy. I would like to see everybody have access to the means to get ahead through achievement. I don't want to see any population advantaged and any population disadvantaged. So I'm anti-supremacy, and that means that I have to be offended. If I'm to be consistent with that principle, I have to be offended when any population seeks supremacy over everybody else. Nonetheless, we find ourselves trapped in a situation where we can't even use the terms that naturally apply. What they've advocated on a more narrow level is, if we were to analyze it honestly, it is a program of radical reparations. And when I say radical reparations, reparations is a controversial concept. I can't say that I'm even necessarily against it if it were wisely done, although I'm pretty sure that simple payments are not a good idea. But nonetheless, I can imagine a good argument for the idea that some populations have been systematically disadvantaged and that the correct remedy for that is to provide some kind of help, systematic help. Now, if it were me writing the script, I would say investment in those communities would be the right way to go. But nonetheless, reasonable people can disagree over what the right way to view a reparations argument is. I don't think reasonable people can disagree over the following question. Is it okay to set up a reparations program in your classroom, right? Are you allowed to transfer the educational well-being of one group of your students to another group of your students? I can't see a reasonable argument for that, and yet I know that that is what is unfolding in classrooms today on the basis that it is clearly the right thing from some people's perspective. The so-called progressive stack, in which students are called upon in reverse order of their historical privilege, is preposterous. For one thing, You know nothing about the individual histories of the students there. I've had white students who have spent years eating roadkill because their families didn't have enough to eat. That student is not somehow so emboldened by a history of privilege that they should wait to ask their question. Questions should be asked by people who have them, and any professor who sidelines students because they're black or they're gay is a problem. Any professor who sidelines students because they're white is a problem. This is just simply what real equity would look like. But nonetheless, we are effectively told that within institutions and within classrooms, that effectively a forced, unacknowledged campaign of reparations is the right solution.